difference between a standard protocol approach versus a problem-solving approach, and I think of that as kind of a student-focused problem-solving approach. And actually, most schools that have a standard protocol approach also use problem-solving at the individual student level when necessary or when appropriate. Standard protocol is this simply that we have a set of decision rules that are already in place about how decisions are going to be made regarding which kids are going to receive what interventions, and those interventions are prescribed. And so we wouldn't, in a standard protocol approach, go and like problem solve, well, what intervention do we want to do, you know, for this group of students or for this particular student that's already prescribed and mapped out. So we're simply identifying which kids fall into what category, and then this is the plan that follows. Versus problem solving, which is more looking at, like a traditional problem solving approach, is really coming in and kind of starting from ground zero on behalf of every student that is identified as having a concern. You sit down, you talk about the concern, you collect diagnostic information, or collect diagnostic or conduct diagnostic assessments about the problem so that it can be better understood, and then you brainstorm interventions that would be best and tailored to that particular student's needs, depending on what the informal diagnostic assessment identified. The problem with problem solving is it's not very efficient, and that that one, it assumes hopefully that you don't have very many kids that have those kind of issues, because it's very time intensive to go and kind of collect that information and to brainstorm interventions. The other problem is that we found is that most teams really don't have the kind of technical training to just be able to brainstorm and create interventions on the fly like that. And so I think you're much better off, in my perspective. It's more efficient. More kids can be served and better by having those interventions clearly prescribed and such as would be available through a standard protocol approach. Now, you could have a system that actually combines both. So you have a standard protocol for the students that are not doing well despite that protocol. Then you could come in and problem solve individual students that despite the protocol in place, they're still not showing the kind of gains that you had hoped for. So and usually the problem solving is really more straightforward than you might think. It's problem solving, how are we going to do a pre-teach, a reteach, a double dose? Is there another group the student needs to move to that's closer aligned with what the skills of this particular student has? So it's, you're really still not just problem solving or brainstorming just interventions out of the blue, even in a problem solving approach. So.
When you talked this morning, you said that a lot of times you'll find that your data, you've got 45% of your kids in below benchmark. When you build your standard protocol, will you see that changing as your students gradually get better? Will you build a standard protocol that for 1 year, while you have 50 kids in intensive, or 50% of your kids in intensive, 20% in benchmark, as they grow out of those, will your standard protocol change as well? Or can you build a standard protocol that fits your needs regardless of what percentage your kids are in intensive? Do you get what I'm asking there?
Yeah, actually, with the standard protocol, the decision rules might remain the same. You just have fewer kids that are falling in those decision rules of like the percent of kids that are below the 20th percentile. As a result of the standard protocol, you may have 50 kids in it this year that actually technically fall in that category, but as a result of carrying out those interventions, out of that group of 50, you may only have 21 next year that still fall into that. And so that you can still use the same decision rules, but just fewer kids are falling into that category as a result of having that system in place. Actually, a good example of that, kind of brag about one of the schools that I'm working with in North Dakota, in Williston, Hagen Elementary. I talked just in the training for elementary about how we evaluate systems, right? How we're evaluating how well systems work. At Hagen Elementary, their intensive system is such that 100% of their kids made adequate progress, which means out of all of their intensive kids, they all made that top quartile growth, which was just like, that means they made multiple years of growth in 1 year, which is just phenomenal. So,
Wow. That's awesome.